Good afternoon, I am your host, Jack Remington of Jack Remington Political Analyst. Today's video is about where we stand today in the Democratic race for nomination for President of the United States 2020. As of film time, Wednesday, today, March 11th, this is where we stand right now in that race. Vice President Joe Biden is at 857 delegates. Senator Bernie Sanders is 709. Elizabeth Warren has 70 delegates. Mayor Mike Bloomberg has 61. Mayor Pete Buttigieg has 26, Senator Amy Klobuchar has 7, and Representative Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii has 2. One quick note, the state of California has not finished tabulating the results from the March 3rd primary, which has about 6% left to count. Many votes tabulated in all races include early absentee ballots, and also the mail-in only state of Washington. In Idaho, this was a two-man race where no one other than Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden got over 3%. Yes, Biden did win that state of Idaho as predicted, but Sanders did better than expected, getting 9 delegates versus the winner, Joe Biden's 11 delegates. In the state of Mississippi, we can see why Bernie Sanders just skipped his last leg of his campaign there. He canceled his last event, and we can see why. Joe Biden smoked the burn with 31 delegates versus Bernie Sanders getting a safety, 2 points, or 2 delegates, a safety in football. Again, no other candidate topped 3%. In the state of Missouri, Biden beat Sanders 40 delegates to 23, but again, Sanders did just enough to hang tough in a state that he was expected to lose in. Also in Missouri, no other candidate topped 2%, a true two-man race. In North Dakota, this was a minor upset, as Bernie Sanders did win that state of North Dakota, getting 8 delegates versus Biden 6 delegates. In Washington State, where I had Bernie Sanders doing the most damage to the Biden campaign here, this was an extremely close race. No one saw this coming, and some precincts are not completed as of film time, were at 67% reporting. Bernie Sanders had a 3,500 vote lead over Biden when I went to bed last night, but today Biden has closed that gap to less than 2,000 with 67% reporting. They both have 17 delegates as of right now. Elizabeth Warren has 12% and Bloomberg at 11% here in the state of Washington, but that's the result of the mail-in only process. The biggest prize from yesterday's primaries was the state of Michigan. Yes, Biden won that state as we predicted, but Bernie Sanders did just enough to stay in the race. Biden got 72 delegates versus Bernie Sanders' 52 delegates. So where does that leave us? In my opinion, this is still a race. Bernie Sanders can still turn things around, but he needs some upsets next week. Just an hour ago, Bernie spoke publicly and he vows to stay in this race. Bernie did this before in the late stages in 2016 before finally giving in to Hillary Clinton. The 2020 Democratic nomination is a different race. Bernie's already planting the seeds of a DNC fix, but this year, the Democrat National Committee, the DNC, is openly discussing its options, but don't let Bernie Sanders fool you here. What the DNC is concerned about is the entire down-ballot effects of a Bernie Sanders nomination. This is not in dispute anywhere except Bernie Sanders, that the avowed Democratic Socialists on the ticket would turn off many voters in many parts of the country on the down-ballot. In 2016, Bernie cried foul at the handling and the awarding of the superdelegates to Hillary Clinton, which tipped the balance to Hillary. But because of that election between Bernie and Hillary, the superdelegate rules have been changed. And in my opinion, these rules actually favor Bernie Sanders only because the superdelegates cannot affect the first round here, avoiding the broker convention, which does not favor Bernie. These facts are also not in dispute other than Hillary bad-mouthing Bernie. She bad-mouths all her opponents. A very interesting dynamic is unfolding here. The Bernie fanatical supporters are going to be with him until the very end as expected, but Bernie Sanders has lost a sizable and decisive portion of the moderate-leaning Democrats. He also lost independent voters, which seem to favor Biden 60-40 or better, which, if reversed, could turn the Biden tide. Before I give final point commentary, I tip my hat off to every candidate, both here and both all sides of the aisles. Tough to get up there and take the constant criticisms, cheap shots, and character assassinations every minute. But 2 things regarding Bernie Sanders' campaign. Number 1, he tripled down on the Fidel Castro love, and his handlers and advisors should have told Bernie to drop the Castro talks, period. Say it was a misunderstanding and just use Elizabeth Warren's line, let's move on. Younger voters don't seem to care or know little about anything regarding Castro, but the majority of voters recall easily the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1961 and heard their parents and other relatives relive that crisis. Number two, pandering to Latinos. This helped you in the West Coast locked up forever states in California, Washington, and probably Oregon with the heavy Latino populations. But this hurt Bernie Sanders in the flyover states, the conservative states, and they also heavily favor Trump. Yes, they can't vote for Trump, obviously, but they gravitate out of fear to Joe Biden. Pledging a blanket amnesty and free health care and free daycare to this group of people has turned off many a JFK Democrat voter. Bernie Sanders can rally here, but he needs upsets in Florida, Arizona, and Ohio. Bernie's expected to do well in liberal Illinois, but the caveat here is to be warned for Bernie Sanders the black vote. Joe Biden expected to landslide in Florida because of the huge Cuban-American population, which is stunningly over 80% GOP voters. They are anti-Castro on any topic. Two things for Joe Biden. Stop cursing the potential voters and trying to act tough. That is never going to work for you, Joe. People can't take a 78-year-old man seriously when he acts like that, can they? Just say you disagree with the man's gun position and state what you are going to do with your Beto O'Rourke. Move on, start listening to your handlers a little more, but at the same time, keep them in check. Early on in the campaign, it looked like they were running the show and getting the credit. Number two, limit your campaign talks, period. When the public sees a lot of you, like in Iowa and New Hampshire, you got crushed. Bernie is a far better campaigner than you, mainly because of his grueling tour in 2016 versus Hillary. But you yourself, Biden, have not campaigned for over 30 years. Final comment. This is still a race, and the March 17th 4 primaries will determine the direction of the Democratic nomination. Barring a serious stumble by Biden, this trajectory is looking like a Biden win. He has about 45% of the 1,191 necessary delegates needed, but Biden does stumble and misspeaks every time he gets out there, but that is factored in when people are going to the polls. The voters are starting to turn away from the Bernie Sanders give the store away mantra, and people see this for what it is. Bernie is saying whatever it takes just to get elected. Yes, America has the largest voter apathy in the first world, not the largest social construct deficiencies. They don't generally like radical sweeping changes, ones like Bernie Sanders proposes, and now are questioning both the cost and the practicality of Bernie Sanders' proposals. Even the most ardent liberals I interview and see online, they like their health insurance and their money. The younger voters have had 4 years of hearing who's going to pay for your free college tuition. When this keeps coming from your parents, it starts to sink in. Amnesty for illegals, free health care and daycare for illegals, I'm not paying for any of that, and neither should you. Always a great day to be an American. Please comment and subscribe. Thank you.